Perfect. Well, again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the Alzheimer's Society tonight. I am your moderator, Stephanie, and our guest speaker tonight will be Doris Bonora. A little bit about Doris. She is an experienced lawyer specializing in estate planning, litigation, and trusts. Doris has over 3 decades of experience representing diverse clients, from individuals to multi-million-dollar trusts. Her commitment extends to pro bono work, offering legal advice to families navigating Alzheimer's disease, supporting low-income elders facing financial abuse, and aiding in estate planning through capital care. Recognized for her dedication, Doris has received several awards, including Wealth Management Lawyer of the Year for the Americas.
Thank you.
Yeah. And a few housekeeping things before we jump into our subject tonight. I do want to take a moment here to for a land acknowledgement and acknowledge the Indigenous people of all the lands we are on today. And while we meet on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home, and our endeavor to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. You can find us also on social media. Our social media tags there are on the screen. We always have some new content, so please give us a follow on whichever social media platform you use. And please continue to check the Help for Dementia website for our upcoming webinars. A few general housekeeping here. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available later on the Help for Dementia website, which is at helpfordementia.ca. And during this presentation, we do ask that everyone has their microphone on mute. That ensures our best sound quality. We will take some time for questions at the end of the presentation. You can also add your questions to the chat at any time or message us directly in the chat. And as always, we remind you that the information provided today is not medical advice. And with that, I would like to welcome our guest speaker, Doris. And
Well,
so Doris,
thank
I will
you. You're going to
get your
share.
presentation up here for you.
Perfect.
Just give me one moment. Okay. There we are.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm so impressed at the number of people who are signed up and want to hear about this topic. I have been involved in dealing with financial fraud on seniors for many years, and probably did one of the very first cases where someone, a son, stole from his mother under an enduring power of attorney, and we were successful in successfully suing him and getting the money back for that family. So it is something I've been involved with for a long time, and certainly have helped many families where they suspected fraud, and we helped doing some investigations to uncover that fraud. So I'm going to talk about lots of different kinds of fraud tonight, but you'll start to see that there's a certain theme around how you can protect yourself, and it's not that hard. You just have to be wary of what these fraudsters are so good at, which is trying to convince you to let your money go to them. So let me just start with, and please feel free to ask questions as we go. But I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of different kinds of fraud. So identity, credit card or debt, the online scams, phone and door-to-door scams, grandparent like scams actually directed to grandparents, romance scams, which of course we all want to be loved, and of course we want to pursue that. And so it's terrible that some of these scams are out there. Tech support scams, government impersonation scams, there's lots of those out there, sweepstakes or charity scams, and then finally I'm going to end with caregiver or family scams. So I'm going to go through this. Hopefully I can get it all in an hour. If we go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Here's the list of scams. I forgot I had to tell you to change it. I was changing it on my own screen. So go ahead, go to the next slide. This shocked me when I was doing some research for this session that in 2022, now this is a US statistic, but nevertheless, there were 88,000 complaints of fraud from people who were over 60, $3.1 billion in losses. And this was an increase of 82% from the previous year. So think about that. This is only successful. Like this should shock everyone and think, oh my God, that is so terrible. But what this also tells you is that fraudsters are getting better and people are vulnerable and it's easy to get involved in a fraud scheme. And so it is important that you really think about what is coming your way, because the only way these numbers get like this is because these fraudsters, these tricksters are good at what they do and they look for people who are vulnerable. So knowledge is power. And of course, that's why you're here today. If we go to the next slide. So I'm going to say that, and this will you'll see as we go through the slides, that many of the classic signs of fraud are speed. So they want you to make a quick decision, right? It's very easy to be pressured. Something terrible is going to happen, or you're not going to win the lottery if you don't make this decision right now. And think about this as we go through all of these different kinds of fraud. Very rarely in your life are you required to make a financial decision or a decision to release information or to get something where you don't have time to do something. So governments are traditionally very slow. They're never going to pressure you right away. And I would say that in almost every case, if you say, I need time to think about that, or I need time to call my daughter, or I need time to call my lawyer, if it's not a fraud, they will give you that time. If it's a fraud, they're going to try their hardest to prevent you and make something more threatening, or that you won't get your prize, or more threatening that something terrible is going to happen. And I would say that you should just generally believe that very, very rarely and almost never will anything happen on a spur of the moment. But that's what they're going to try and get you to believe. It's usually on the phone or on the internet. There are some door-to-door scams, so we'll talk a bit about those too. And so, as I said, it's usually you're required to make quick decisions under the threat of a bad consequence, or the threat of losing out, or the threat on a family member. That's where the grandparent scams come from. The other classic sign is they don't want anything that will trace them. So they love prepaid credit cards. If anyone asks you for a prepaid credit card, that is a classic sign of fraud. Never, ever, ever give anyone a prepaid credit card. There are other ways to pay, and the money should be traceable. So if you can make it traceable, it's probably not a fraud. Or they'll request cash, because of course, again, not traceable. So don't be fooled, though, by legitimate looking phone numbers. So I don't know if any of you have noticed, but recently I get all kinds of phone calls from people in what looks to be like a legitimate Alberta town and little towns. So from Canmore or Bruderheim or Fort Saskatchewan. And initially I was inclined to answer those calls. And then I realized that most of those calls are probably fraudulent. And so if the person is really trying to reach you, they'll leave a voicemail. You don't have to answer. If they haven't left a voicemail, you know it was a fraud. They have a kind or very knowledgeable voice. You know, when we were teaching our children to be careful of people who might steal them away, we often made that person feel like a monster, right? They were going to be a monster and they had to be careful of monsters. But what we learned very quickly is people who stole children were the kindest people ever, because they could lure children in and say, come pet my cat, come see my little puppy. And that made children interested. It's the same in fraud. They're never going to be the kind of person you don't want to talk to necessarily. They're going to feel like someone who knows what they're doing, because that lures you in. And then again, it's all about not allowing you time to consider what they're asking you. So just remember, fraudsters are good at what they do. That's why they can bilk $3 million out of people. So if we go to the next slide. So First, let's talk a bit about government impersonation scams. So these are quite common and they usually come from the CRA. So they are pretending to be someone from the CRA. They're going to threaten arrest if there's no payment or if information isn't provided. Um, Believe me, CRA is never doing things this way. CRA is never going to send the police to arrest you. They move slower than anyone else that I know. They will never ask you for information over the phone. They have the most encrypted system. I can tell you, I want sometimes to give them information. I'm working on estates. I'm working on trying to file a tax return for a trust, and it takes me forever to actually give them my information so that they will give me authority to get into their system. So believe me that when you get a call from CRA that says either you pay this money immediately or the police are coming, just hang up and call the police and see if the police are actually coming. I'm sure the police are not coming. The CRA have very little ability to arrest people or throw people in jail. That isn't going to happen. They might give you a summons, but it'll come in paper. They might want to come and take all the papers from your house. That they do, but often they don't even give you a warning about that because then you might burn your papers or hide them. So, and so much is digital now, even those things that they used to do where they'd show up at someone's business and take all their papers doesn't happen that often because people don't have paper anymore. So if somebody's calling you and saying, I need your social insurance number, I'm from the CRA or I'm from the Canada Pension Plan, just say no, because whatever needs to happen can be done under calm circumstances. And if they really need your information, you can figure that out. They will send you a document that says, here's what you're going to have to do to provide this information, and it will involve some kind of encrypted system. You can also, like I would say, if you always just say, I'm never going to do this unless I give a pause. So someone's calling you and threatening you and asking you for information. Just remember this. Say, I'm just going to hang up and I'm going to get some advice and then I can call you back. But you're never going to call them back because they will give you a number, right? That you can call them and then it'll seem legitimate. You're going to call, you're going to look up the CRA and then you're going to call them or you'll have your accountant call them. But be assured that the government is never going to come and either ask for your information over the phone. They're never going to want to get money right away without you seeing some piece of paper, and they're never sending the police. So when these things happen to you, when you hear this on the phone, just ignore it, hang up. If you feel the need to have somebody call and make sure everything's okay with your income tax, then do that. But for the most part, you can completely ignore these. Go ahead on the next slide. So lots of robocalls or phone scams. And this one, it's so unusual but something you should think about. So a common robocall is where they say, can you hear me? And they just want you to say yes because they want to get your voice. And then they record your voice and they hang up and then they use your voice for another robocall where they might be able to get into your credit card using your voice recognition. So so these things, if the person says, can you hear me? Just hang up because they'll call back if they really need to talk to you. If you don't recognize the number, you really shouldn't answer the phone. Just have your phone be monitored in the sense that people will leave voicemails. And I promise you, if someone wants to get a hold of you, they will text you, they will leave you a voicemail. Just don't answer calls from numbers you don't know. That's just a very easy way to avoid any kind of fraud. Go ahead. So this is a common one where you'll get a pop-up message that'll appear on your computer or your phone telling you that your device is damaged in some way. And then when you call the number for support, the scammer will request remote access to your computer. So again, here's another instance where probably, if some message pops up, you don't have to deal with it right away. You can get some help from someone who knows computers better. It is rare that your whole computer is going to be damaged or your phone is going to be damaged from a pop-up message. So I would say anything that looks so dire on your computer, just ignore until you can call someone who knows about computers, call some tech support, or you can just shut down your computer and see if it comes back. But this happened to a person where they lost their life savings to scammers who were pretending to be from an antivirus company. And if you read the story, they said they were from an antivirus company that was well known. You could search it and it seemed like a well-known antivirus company. And they said they were trying to give the man a refund for unused software. And by doing that, they got access to his bank account and his home equity line of credit, and they made away with $200,000 that was never recovered. I can tell you that the chance of recovering money if you give it away is really rare. These people are so good at being able to move it from account to account to account to offshore before you have any chance to even figure out that you have inappropriately lost money. So don't respond to things that pop up on your computer or your phone. If it's on your phone, you can call your phone provider and just ask them about the message. If on your computer, please ask someone before you click on something that could, in fact, install a virus or get you to a place where now somebody's going to ask you for money. But I would say in all of these cases, let's say in this case, you did click on it, you were worried that it might wreck your computer, and now somebody is asking you for access to your computer, never give that. So now you have, maybe you didn't get past, maybe you didn't listen to me and you clicked on the message, but now they're asking for access to your computer. You should never say yes to that, except to someone that you really know. I mean, we have tech support in our office. I know they can ask for access and I give it to them, but I would never give access to anyone else. And then, of course, in each of these kinds of scams, there will be a request for money. And that's where you should for sure stop. That's when you have to ask someone else whether this makes sense. You should never send money unless you absolutely know that you should be sending money, that you owe the money, that you're sending it to a legitimate source. And then you should think about how to send the money. We'll talk a bit about that later. Let's go on. So when you're faced with, some kind of fraud, what should you do? So, first be wary. But again, that's hard because these people are so good about that. But if you think about unexpected communication, so most of us have communications from known sources. Our work is calling us, our children are calling us, our parents are calling us, some kind of family member. We know who we get phone calls from. As soon as you get a phone call from someone you don't expect, you should be wary about that phone call. Or that email or that online message, because that is exactly what people are expecting, is that they are calling people who just answer everything. And then, of course, as I said before, any kind of, real tech departments would never ask you to pay with gift cards or a bank card, like a credit card that is not attributed to anyone. Be assertive if the caller insists there's an urgent problem with your computer. Don't be alarmed or don't be afraid to say no and hang up. There's really no computer problems that can't wait to be addressed. I mean, I know I've been in the middle of something where I have to file something in court and my computer is going, bonkers, and I call and I get immediate help. But generally, there are no problems that need to be addressed immediately. And so then, but let's say you are worried, then just hang up and say you're going to make some inquiries and you'll call back. But then you won't call their number that they gave you, because of course that is classic, where they give you a number and then it sounds reputable when you call back. You're going to verify the number independently. You will Google them, you will find out, and then you'll call the number you find. And that way you'll be sure that whether it's a real thing or not. And I would say, absolutely never give out your personal or financial information by email or by phone, except where you absolutely know that now you're, applying for your passport or you're applying for a credit card and you know it's from a reputable source, but you have decided to do that. You haven't been asked by someone to do it. Otherwise, you just make yourself so incredibly vulnerable. So, if it's with a credit card, I have to say most credit cards are very good about not making you pay if you can prove that it has been fraud. So credit cards are a good way to pay for things because generally they will write it off if they know that it's fraud and you can prove that it's fraud. But in the statement at the bottom here, if you're in doubt, just don't engage. Don't give access to your devices or share any personal information. That's just an adage. If you just are good at saying no, I'm going to do some investigation first and then I will figure this out, you're going to be good. And don't be afraid of being rude. We're so polite most of the time that we don't want to hang up on anyone. Hang up on them. It's fine. This is not your friend. That you don't need them to come to Christmas dinner. Just hang up on them. And I assure you that if there's anything legitimate, they will absolutely, whether it's a government or a bank, they will absolutely try and get back and deal with you. So you don't have to worry that this problem won't be sorted out. Next slide. So the grandparent scam, so terrible. I have had a few clients who, in fact, have been taken by this scam where scammers call a would-be grandparent and say something like, "Hey, grandma, do you know who this is?" The unaware grandparent guesses and the person goes along with that. This is a problem because one of the problems with this is that young people share a ton of information online. So they share on Instagram and they share on Facebook and all of their social media platforms. So fraudsters can learn a lot about grandchildren that then they can share with a grandmother that makes it sound like this person is the grandchild. And then in other schemes, the grandchild doesn't call, but the arresting police officer calls, or it's a doctor or a lawyer trying to help the grandchild. In one of my clients who got caught by this, she said there were three people on the line. Later, she wondered whether it was just the same person impersonating a different voice, but it was a lawyer who called to say her grandchild had been arrested. The lawyer said the grandchild was pleading with the grandparent not to tell the parents because they were going to be in so much trouble. They then had a judge who also said that he had set the bail and the bail was at a certain amount of money. It had to be paid in a certain way and it had to be paid by a certain time. And then there was a Crown prosecutor. And so all three of them spoke to her to say, let me assure you, this is not a scam. This is absolutely true. Your grandchild's in trouble. If you don't pay post bail, they're going to jail. And you know what happens in jail. And and of course, it has to be secret, So this is something you just have to be so wary of. This isn't going to happen. Judges don't talk to grandparents on the phone. Lawyers might call, but then you know what? You can hang up and call your grandchild on their phone. Maybe they don't answer because if they're in jail, they probably wouldn't have their phone. But then call your child. You know what? If it is really that they are in jail, their parents are going to find out. There's not going to be this big secret. And or you can hang up and say, you need to speak to your lawyer. At that point, the lawyer will tell you, this is absolutely a scam. And I have had bankers tell me that when grandparents come in and say, I need like a money order or I need this prepaid credit card for $2,500. And they say, why do you need it? It's like, oh, I have to help. I don't tell anyone, but I have to help my grandchild, that they immediately try and redirect this so that the money is not sent. So the people are really good at this. The person who I know got caught by this absolutely was a smart person and would not have thought they were vulnerable. They were so embarrassed to admit that they got caught by this, but they just said the people were so, so good on the phone. And sometimes as the slide says, they will actually send someone to your house to pick up the money. So they're good at what they do. Um, go to the next slide. Okay, so um, romance scams. This is so terrible because, of course, we are all looking for love, and that's okay. And most people meet their partners online. So, of course, online dating scams are very popular, and lots of people are being bilked out of money because of this. So, do we lose the
Yeah,
slide?
sorry, you can,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna pull it up. My
Okay.
thing decided to close, but I'll
Oh,
go
that's
right
okay.
back to
No
where
problem.
you were.
That's okay. It was nice to see some of the people online. So they often create elaborate fake profiles, often on social media, and they're good at and they prey on loneliness. And like that's completely legitimate. None of us likes being lonely. We like to be liked. We like to have new friends. You know, my dad, his um second wife, my stepmother of like 35 years died. And I see his loneliness. It's so sad to watch. So it's completely understandable that people would like to find someone to love them and love you. But what they do is they're very good at love bombing. So they are like, you are the best person in the world. You are the most beautiful person in the world. They will do what they can to make you feel so, so loved. Because they want you to love them back because they're hoping you will send money. They sometimes pretend to be from overseas. They can claim to be one of the things you can notice is they can claim to be a native English speaker, but then their grammar isn't very good, or their spelling isn't very good, or their accent might tell you otherwise. And then they'll start to ask for money. And they will have many sob stories about they need money for a visa so they can come and visit you. Or maybe they have a medical emergency, their own medical emergency, their mother's medical emergency, or they need money for travel expenses to come and visit. Let us say that you do fall in love online, and then somebody says, hey, I don't really have a lot of money. I wonder, I'd love to come see you because I'm so in love with you. I'd like to, but I don't have the money. Could you pay for a ticket? So don't send them money. Buy a ticket. Buy a ticket for them. And they'll, of course, try and convince you otherwise because they don't want the ticket. They want your money. But if you say, no, no, I can arrange it and I can send it to you, then that will be no good for them, right? There are lots of ways you can kind of suss them out. But I would also say, let's say fall in love and you and do in fact send money for travel expenses, only send money once. If they then ask for money a second time, the answer should be no, because that's the key is they get you started and you pay some and then you pay some more. And then suddenly you are sending so much money to them. And then you're embarrassed to tell people about it, even though it's very clearly a scam. And so these ones are usually like where the CRA ones and the grandparent scam is a one-time event. They just want to get your money and get out. These ones often go on for quite a long time because they need to keep dragging you along and keep developing new stories so you will send more and more money. And you can see that in 2022, there was $1.3 billion that was lost in romance scam. So think about some tips around how you might figure it out. So in the event that they've told you something about themselves, like they're in the military, or maybe they were an Olympian or something, you can write scam in the Google and just put in the word. And then it'll tell you all kinds of stories about how the scam happens, like with that piece of information. And that might lead you to thinking that it is in fact a scam. You can also perform a reverse image search. So you can if they've sent you a picture, you can put that picture into Google and it'll show you where the picture's from if it even exists. And so I can tell you, we had one where there was a client of mine who was trying to sell his timeshare. Okay, remember he was selling. But suddenly he was starting to pay a whole bunch of money to these people in Mexico in order to sell his condo. And finally, his wife put a stop to it, and he was really mad at her. But she sent us like the latest from this company that had led him along for a long time. And at the time that we got involved, I think he'd already sent about $700,000. Like, think about that. Remember, he was selling his timeshare. And it was so easy to figure out that this was a scam. So first of all, on their website was completely amateur. So that was should have been telling us something. But as soon as we did a reverse image search, we saw that the pictures of the people that he was dealing with were just stock photography. So you could find these pictures on stock photography, and it was so easy. So let us say, oh, but they're the models for stock photography. Pretty unlikely. Then when we looked up their address was in New York, and it was in the building that replaced the World Trade Center. And so we just called the leasing agent for the building and just said, can you tell us who's on the 111th floor? And they were like, no one. No one's on the 111th floor. It's for lease. Would you like to lease it? It's like, nope, not interested in leasing. But that clearly told you they didn't have an address. And of course, their phone number would have led you to getting them. But ultimately, everything about this was a complete scam, and it was pretty easy to figure out. This was not a sophisticated scam at all. So, with some easy Google searches, you can pretty much find scams. And again, if you just say, no, give me a minute to think about it, pause, go do some searches, you probably won't be scammed. For sure, never send intimate photos of yourself because that gives them an opportunity to blackmail you. So, really, that should just be a no-no at all. Never, never, never send intimate photos of yourself. It's just too dangerous, too embarrassing, to do that if it gets out. And they don't remember, you're dealing with criminals. They don't care about you. They don't care that your image might be plastered all over the internet. That is not of interest to them. They will do anything to get money from you. If you truly are seeing someone and you want to make sure they're for real, ask to meet them in a safe space with someone else just to make sure that they are actually going to come. And if they're overseas and they can't come, okay, that's fine. But if they're pretending to be from a place near you, then ask to meet them. They won't want to come if they're scammers. They'll have lots of excuses. After excuse number two, you should get rid of the person. And as I said, search the address because I just told you about how easy it was to figure out that the address either didn't exist or they weren't at that address. So Google, I think doctors think Dr. Google is kind of a problem sometimes, but Google in scamming can tell you lots about whether this is truly a scam or not. Go ahead to the next slide. So some other scams, business imposter scammers, where they pretend to be from a business or a charity. They want you to trust them so they can steal your personal information or money. They might show up at the door and say, hey, we can fix your roof, or, why don't you just give us a small deposit? We'll be back. Never do any of those things. Investment scams, of course, they want you to, they're going to give you the best return ever. Like, forget the banks. They're going to give you this amazing return. Lots of that involves cryptocurrency. They'll try and prey on the fact that you're not knowledgeable and you're behind the times and you need to get in touch with the times and you need to invest money. One of the common scams that I had a couple of clients involved in is they bought some foreign currency. So the story was, you can buy this currency. The country's in trouble. When they revalue their currency, you're going to be a gazillionaire. And I was so shocked at how these people had just poured so much money. And they had come to see me because they were about to be a gazillionaire. So they needed like some advice on how to be a gazillionaire. They maybe needed trust or whatever. And it took me like less than 30 seconds to type in like, I think there was some Nigerian money and some Vietnamese money. I can't remember, Cambodian money maybe. And like just that kind of currency and scam. And it was so clear that it was a scam. Plus, the idea that a country revalues money is like not a thing. It just doesn't happen. And then you wonder, like, the people who are selling this money, why wouldn't they just keep it? Because then they would be like a multi-gazillionaire if that was going to happen. It made no sense that they were selling this currency for real dollars. So anything that seems too good to be true is too good to be true. Just count on that. And again, like before you give money to anyone, just go away and do your research and don't be skeptical of what other people tell you, right? Don't believe the fraudsters. And then internet or email fraud, where you have prop up browser windows that look like antivirus software. We talked a bit about this before, or an antivirus program. People want to sell you those things. So just again, be cautious. Be cautious about what people are trying to sell you. Remember, they're good. They're good at the sales pitches. And if you just, again, take a pause, don't give money right away, do some investigation, and then you should be fine. Truly, if there is an investment that is legitimate, there will never be like a 1 day time limit on it. Even if you're buying into a low, stock and you're hoping it'll go high, there will always be lots of time to do it. Maybe on some stocks for sure, it's a smaller window, but it'll never be this minute you need to act. That's what's important. Next. So phishing. This is a very common technique where you get an email with a story to try and trick you into clicking on a link or opening an attachment. And it will often look like perfect. It looked like it's expected from a, expected trust company or a bank or a utility company or from some online payment website. All of them look great. Remember, these guys are good at what they do. So they might say something like they've noticed some suspicious activity or login attempts. Never fall for that. They're not going to call you with that. If the bank wants to get you, and they want you to look at your statement and they want to talk to you, they will send it in some encrypted message where you have to set up an email, you have to set up a password to get in, and then they'll say you need to call us or you need to look at this and then get in touch with us. Never are they going to just send you an email with something that says you have a suspicious activity. So they'll claim there's a problem with your account or your payment information. They'll say you need to confirm some personal or financial information. Again, never, never, never give out financial information. They might include an invoice that you don't recognize. That's always going to be fake. They might want to click on a link that has malware in it. Don't click on links that you don't know. No matter how legitimate it seems, just don't click on them. They'll wreck your computer, or they'll have some malware in it that allows them to get into your financial information. Government people don't send out registrations for a government refund. If there's some refund program, they might advertise it. You'll always go to a government website to get an application that you have to fill out and then send it in. Offers for free stuff are not real. I can tell you, I've bought some things on the internet. It's crazy. Do not, like, if a sweater is only $5, it's not going to be something you want to wear. And nothing is ever free. So don't click on those coupons. They really, really won't be real. The other ones that I often see is that there's a package for you, and they have to pay some duty in order to get the package. That doesn't happen that way. So and if you haven't ordered anything, there's not going to be a package. So don't fall for that. But let me show you a phishing scheme in the next slide that looks pretty real. So here's an example. So this is Netflix. Please update your payment details. And then it says we're having some trouble with your current billing information. We'll try again, but in the meantime, you may want to update your payment details. This doesn't sound like a terrible monster, right? It sounds pretty polite. And then it says if you need help, you can visit this or contact them, and it's signed off by your friends at Netflix. Netflix logo is at the top. It all looks very legit, and it says your account is on hold. So what are you worried about? That you won't be able to watch Netflix later. But as soon as you click on this and update your account information, probably they're going to ask for banking information so that you can pay your bill, and that's when they've got you. So think about this. If you just like don't pay attention to this, go to Netflix, go find out if your account needs some updating. Let's say this was legitimate and your account was on hold. First thing you should do is go see if Netflix is still playing on your TV. Like if it is, then your account clearly isn't on hold. And let's say it was legitimate and your account was on hold and you were without Netflix for a day. That would not be the end of the world while you figured out if this was a phishing scheme or not. So they are amazingly good. Lots of times the email addresses can just be one letter off. In my law firm, we had a $3 million deal that was going. We had to pay out $3 million after there was a sale of a building. And at the last minute, there was an email that came in and it said, and the email looked to be completely legitimate. And it just said, we're just changing the account. It's off by a number. Please send the money to this account. The email address, I had trouble figuring out what the problem was. And it was that in a regular email address, they had used a regular A and they just used a different A. And that was enough to have like a different kind of email to be responded to. And then of course the money was going to an account that would never be recovered. So luckily in our law firm, we always have a process where before we send money, we call and we confirm the account number by phone with the person that we know we should speak to. And that determined that the money should not have gone to that account and we were able to save the money. But I can tell you that many lawyers have been caught and money has disappeared. And as I said, they are so quick to move money from this account to another account to offshore that is almost impossible to catch the money. And you may remember that a few years ago, Nate was caught Nate or Grant McEwen, one of the colleges anyway in town, was caught where they were making a payment on a construction contract, and someone just sent them a different account, but the email looked similar, and they were able to defraud a major institution. So understand that when I say, we're talking tonight about fraud on seniors, if someone who's a sophisticated account manager at a major university can be defrauded that easily, these people are very good at what they do. Let's go on to the next slide. So I've talked about now up to this point, the whole issue around financial fraud by monsters out there who are trying to get you, but there might be monsters at home. So I see lots of financial fraud under enduring powers of attorney. So of course we need a power of attorney. If we get sick, if we develop a dementia, we need someone to help us with our finances. And so of course that's what the power of attorney is all about. So first, of course, everyone should have one, but we need to think carefully, very carefully about who you're going to appoint in your documents. So if you're married, you probably appoint your spouse. But when you're looking at if it's not a spouse, if it's someone else, is it a child or is it a trusted family friend? Think about appointing more than one person so they can oversee each other. And I would say that in all the cases of fraud that I've dealt with under a power of attorney, the reason they work is because there's only one person appointed. And what happens is often it's not stealing right from the start. Usually the person is thinking, my aunt doesn't really need this money. Like I could probably just pay off my car and she wouldn't care. And I'm going to be a beneficiary anyway. So, that'll be okay, right? And I use my car to help her anyway. So that's going to be okay. And they just start to slowly borrow or take some money and then they take a bit more and take a bit more. And then suddenly now there's hardly any money left. So if you can build in some ways to prevent fraud in your power of attorney, like appointing more than one person so they oversee each other, requiring your attorney to report finances to someone with supporting documents so that then there's at least one other person who once a year is going to see that you still have your money in your bank account. That can be very good. The other thing if someone is asking you for money, and as we get older, we are a little more vulnerable and we like to say yes to people. Say no. Say no to requests for loans, or if you're going to give somebody a loan, make sure you document it. If they're asking for a gift, make sure you document it so we know what is happening. What is the problem is often when money starts to disappear from an older person's bank account and we don't know exactly why all of that money is going. But generally, it would be good not to give unlimited access to anyone in your finances. And you can certainly say no to placing certain restrictions on assets, like don't sell my cottage or don't sell my house. Next slide. The other area of fraud we see is caregivers or family scams, where someone just comes and helps you a lot and then they stay longer. This happens a lot with farmers. So their farmers never want to leave their house. They're definitely not going to some institution. And so they hire someone to help them. And that person becomes more and more trusted. They're around more often. Um, and suddenly they become the person who is the sole beneficiary in the will. So, we're saying around caregivers or, family members who maybe hang around too much, don't discuss money. Don't leave your mail around for people to read if you still get, actual mail. It's okay, I think, to leave small gifts in your will, or to people who have helped you and who have been important to you. But be careful about falling for stories about sick relatives, or falling for stories about immigration problems where someone needs money to help with that, falling for stories about children being in trouble or genius children who need money for school. If in fact you decide you'd like to give some money, it would be good if it was a loan and not a gift, and you can do a simple promissory note to document that loan. And then if you do have someone help you with finances, if you just give limited access, like they, can help with your checking account, but they don't have access to all of your finances, so that you don't put everything at risk. So I don't want to scare you, because I really think it's so important that you have people who can help you when you need it, when you're sick, and you should have a power of attorney. But there are just ways that you can build in some protections so that you don't become the victim of a family member or a caregiver within your own household. Okay, so I did pretty well. We're going to try and leave 15 minutes for questions at the end. Not quite 15, but pretty good. So I'm really happy to answer any questions you might have.
So if anyone has any questions for Doris, please feel free to either unmute yourself or raise your hand and ask away. Or if you'd like to type in a question to the chat, you can certainly do so, and I'll keep an eye on those. Chris, I don't know if you had any questions coming to you directly, but right now I see Sabina has a question. Go ahead, Sabina.
Hi, yeah, thanks for this presentation. I thought it was really helpful. I
Good.
have a question because I got an email from something called On Guard, which I believe is BMO's identity theft protection. And anyway, I Googled it online to see, and it said yes, and it said you should log into your online banking, and then from there you can access this system. So I did, because I hadn't actually set up an account before. I thought, well, I probably should do that. And then it asked me which accounts, which cards I wanted them to be monitoring. So I was putting in this info, and then it asked me for my passport number. And I thought, oh, and they were saying, we have to check if someone's using your passport or something like that. So then I didn't do that. I just clicked next, skipped this step. The next one was they wanted my social insurance number. So I clicked next, I skipped the step. I can't remember what the last one was. Then it started asking me, which branch are you banking with? And it gave me these addresses that didn't match anything I'm familiar with. And then I realized it was for Ottawa or something. And I thought, well, why would they do that? Like, I'm in Edmonton. So then I just left the whole thing, and I quickly wrote an email to the bank manager of our branch to say, I mean, he's not there now, he'll see it tomorrow, just to say, is this legitimate? Like, I'm not sure. And then I thought I should try to get back on there and delete all that information. But when I tried to get back on, it was just asking me like the next question in its sequence. So what do you do in a case like that?
You couldn't get back to, like, it wouldn't let you go back and erase
No,
information.
no. It was asking me things like, I can't remember what it was asking me, but stuff that I didn't want to answer anything, but every time I went back, it was like the next question, the next question. Yeah.
You know what? I would just, I mean, I don't know that you can go back and delete it, obviously. But I
Yeah.
think that you should tell obviously you've alerted your bank. I think that's the only thing you can do now is to say,
Okay.
you know, put a hold on my account, except for those things I've pre-authorized. Don't let any money leave the account and let it be monitored for 3 months or 4 months, and then you should be fine. And
Okay.
I
Nice.
mean, it could be a legitimate company. It's just that's a lot of information. So good for
Yeah.
you for suddenly getting nervous and stopping the whole process. So
I
that
shouldn't
is
even
very
have
good.
started, I think. But anyway, yeah.
But like, yeah, and who knows, you could be fine. But the point is, you were trying to prevent yourself from being defrauded, right? Like it's the very
Right.
nature of what you were trying to do. So, but yeah, I think banks are pretty good about putting a notice on your account that money shouldn't go out because they're so involved in these fraud schemes. And sometimes the banks have been held responsible if they haven't been careful about the money leaving accounts. So they're pretty good about helping you out.
Okay. Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, you're welcome.
And Doris, I believe Chris has sent to you a few questions that she got
Okay,
in the chat. Are you able to see those in your chat?
let me see 2 messages. So the one question is, are there insurance policies or other financial protections that can help someone recover from financial losses due to fraud? Certainly professionals have them, like we have insurance to cover clients in the event that we are defrauded out of money. I've not seen anything that helps people personally, but I think the second question is it best to pay for everything with a credit card instead of a debit card? And the answer for me on that one is yes, because the credit cards are so good about getting fraud. But it's also important for you to check your credit card a lot. So you shouldn't just assume that, the balance is the balance. And even if you are scared of the balance and you don't want to look at your credit card because maybe you've done too much shopping, it's still really important to look at your credit card every once in a while and see if there are charges that don't make sense to you. And sometimes the charges don't make sense because you actually have legitimately perhaps spent the money, but they come from a company that doesn't make sense to you because it'll maybe be charged through a parent company and the company locally is called something different. Ask the bank to investigate all of those. Challenge them, make sure that you look, and if you can prove that it wasn't you, I guarantee you the credit card company will take it off the bill. So I agree that is the best way to do it as opposed to thinking about buying fraud insurance. And the other question is, will Canada Post ever contact you to pay for something? No, they're only going to let you pay when you go to pick up a parcel. So never fall for the Canada Post. It's the same with Amazon. I definitely get messages that I have an Amazon parcel that isn't being released because I need to pay money to get it released. That is never true. That's not going to happen. So no, don't fall for any of the parcel kinds of scams. Um, this next one, put money in a new joint
Yes.
account with my son to help him out in trade school. He received a small gift of money from his work, but never told me. Once he finished his short 2-month trade school, I did not close the joint account, yet I noticed he had removed money from this account. I haven't made it over to the bank to close the account. What should I do? So, well, you can call and, close the account. You can do it online. Um, it is sad when people take advantage, of course, but this is a good lesson as well. Joint accounts are never a really good way. Like if this was a joint account that you were only using for that purpose, that might be okay. But joint accounts cause a lot of trouble. Because when you have a joint account, each person is an owner of 100% of the money in that account. So it's not as though you each own 50%, it's 100%. And that's why every owner on a joint account has the ability to go and take all of the money that's in that account. It also causes trouble when people die, because then we don't know, is this person supposed to have received the money in that account? Because the joint account usually has what we call a right of survivorship. So it goes to the owner, right? Husbands and wives do that all the time. They have a joint account. When one of them dies, it just goes to the survivor. But when it's involving children, it can be very hard on families where the child could say, oh no, mom wanted me to have this money, or the child does the legitimate thing and shares it with his siblings. So I just am not a favor of the use of joint accounts unless it's, particular to the money that you're using, and it's only for a particular purpose, and you don't have a lot of money in there. You could, the problem here is the bank is probably not going to be that interested in helping you unless you're prepared to say that your son was fraudulent, and they'll call the police, and you maybe don't want to do that. But yeah, joint accounts are a problem. I hope I answered your question. So this is a good question. That a problem is a slow onset of dementia. Judgment is frequently impaired long before they might be considered officially unfit to manage their finances, and the POA is enacted. I think a person in this stage is most susceptible to fraud. So true. Another problem is that some people with dementia have paranoia as well. This makes it difficult as well to help them with their finances. So my answer to that is that lots of people think about the power of attorney as being something that springs into effect when somebody is declared incapacitated. And we all know with dementia that that can be a very up and down journey. So some days they're good and some days they're bad, but to get the doctor appointment on the right day to declare that they're not doing well is often very difficult, kind of like shooting darts. So we recommend when somebody has an early onset of dementia, that they do what's called an immediate power of attorney. So it comes into effect immediately. It doesn't take away the person's powers or rights in their banking, which means that then you're not like taking them out of the picture. They can still use their credit card. They can still write checks if that's what they'd like to do. They can still go to the bank. But it allows you, as their dementia progresses, or it allows the person appointed in the power of attorney, as their dementia progresses, to, in the background, help them by decreasing the limit on the credit card, decreasing the amount in the bank account, decreasing the amount they can take out from a money machine, without actually confronting them. So you don't have to necessarily deal with the paranoia, and you can try and make them less susceptible. So that is a way that we find that works pretty well, because you immediately have power and you can do some things in the background as the dementia progresses. And if you're looking at your power of attorney and you want to know, is it a springing one or an immediate, it'll say something like, this power of attorney comes into effect immediately and will continue if I'm mentally incapacitated, or it'll say this only comes into effect when one doctor or two doctors declares me incapacitated. And if you are dealing with someone who has an early onset, they're still, could sign a legal document, then they could change their power of attorney from a springing one to an immediate one, which I really think is so useful and so helpful and really almost necessary in any kind of diagnosis of dementia.
And Doris, I think we have time for maybe to squeeze in one last question, as we're almost just at
Okay.
8 o'clock here. And I believe, Chris, did you want
Yeah, there should just be one more.
one more
Okay.
question?
So let me just read
One
this.
more question in the
So
chat.
parents
Yeah.
assigned one of three children under a power of attorney. The son power of attorney has been very tight-fisted with showing transactions that have been made. My parents are at a state of Alzheimer's that they side with him and do not understand the consequences of one power of attorney. Property has changed owners to include the power of attorney and should be all three children. Large items have been purchased and put in the power of attorney's name. How does one maneuver this? So if your parents are not prepared to do anything, you can still apply to have the court to have the person do an accounting. So the court has an overseer role in any kind of situation where someone is taking care of someone else's money. And if they in fact have taken money or made large purchases, that is exactly what the court will look for to say, yes, an accounting should be provided. It is unfortunate that your parents are not prepared to do anything, but if they are at the stage of dementia where they can't really understand what's going on, then you could. I would say that, you don't have to go all the way to court. My view is if I'm acting for someone and another child comes along and says, I'd like an accounting, my answer is always yes, provide the accounting because you have nothing to hide. If the person won't provide the accounting, then you may need to go to court to try and stop this abuse. The problem is with abuse is that of course, the abuse is wrong, but if the person at the end of the day doesn't have any money left, it doesn't matter that you get a judgment against them or, have the court declare that the abuse is wrong and they should pay back the money. If there's no money, it'll just all be lost. So now this person obviously feels empowered, perhaps because the parents are not doing anything. So you may need to involve the courts in order to stop it. So
Thank you. Thank you, Doris. And
yeah.
I know we're just at 8 o'clock here, but as always, for those who are joining us online tonight, if you do have any further questions or you need any additional supports, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Chris has put our contact information there in the chat. We can be reached at our toll-free number, by email. There's tons of information on our website. And I do want to again thank you, Doris, for joining us this evening. It's always great to have you come out and share your expertise with us. And I think tonight was just such an important topic that everyone really needs to be aware of and vigilant in assessing those risks that can come, left, right, and center sometimes. So thank you
Yeah.
for your time this evening,
You're
and thank you,
welcome.
everyone. And please do check out Help for Dementia again for our webinar coming up in March, and the topic will be around understanding MAID here in Canada. So another very interesting topic coming up, and we hope to see
That's
you
a
there.
very interesting topic. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yes. And I just want to say thank you. I have to say it's a topic that's dear to my heart, but I also enjoyed doing the research for this. So thank you everyone for coming out and allowing me to present.
Great. Thanks, everyone.